Hello everyone, today I have a more fun video idea. I will be discussing which character has the safest and best house overall in GTA Online and some characters from GTA Story Mode, like the main three. Now when I say safest, I mean from both authorities and gang members, thugs, whatnot. The house, if it's too flashy, that kind of can screw you. It is kind of blowing your cover a little bit, and if the house is lower, kind of Swamish looking, you will be safe from the FIB and the IAA and whatnot, but then you will have to deal with some thugs, and we'll discuss that. So now let's just get into it. And if you do enjoy this video, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps me out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. I don't really know how it entirely works, but all I know is it likes when people subscribe and like, so please do so. And now let's get into it. Starting off with Franklin's house. Now I'll be talking about his house in Strawberry first. His house in Strawberry is pretty Swamish looking, but it is a good cover. It won't trip off any sort of alarms or whatever. It's very unassuming looking. You wouldn't suspect that the person living in there, when Franklin lives in there, towards the end of him living there, he does have a good amount of money from certain jobs that he's done. So that does protect his cover in terms of that. And his house in Vinewood Hills is the complete opposite. It's not Swamish at all. It's big, it's bold, and that does kind of set off some alarms, but everything is safe there. And I think he's actually good there because Lester told him in the story mode somebody needs to live there for tax reasons. So in that aspect, he is probably safe, but it is still something to think about. Overall, his house in Strawberry is pretty safe, but you do have to deal with some thugs, which could be a little bit dangerous. But in the neighborhood, the specific side of neighborhood that Franklin is in, the family side of neighborhood, he should be fine because he knows everyone. As long as he doesn't go down to Grove Street, he should be fine and safe from thugs. Overall, both of his houses are pretty solid. The big house is safe from the feds and thugs because everything's legal and covered for tax purposes and everything like that. And his house in Strawberry, he is safe from thugs because that's his neighborhood, and he's safe from the FIB because it's very unassuming looking. Moving on to Michael, his house in the Rockford Hills. His house in the Rockford Hills is kind of not unassuming looking. It's pretty big, pretty bold, and he lives in a pretty affluent part of town. But because he is in witness protection, he should be all good to go there. I'm just kidding. I already see the storm in the comment section. But overall, his house is pretty safe, obviously from thugs and from the feds because everything is perfectly legal as far as they're concerned. He also happens to know a fed who, in case of things getting kind of iffy, could pull some strings for him, and he will probably end up being fine. So overall, his house is very safe from both the thugs and the feds, and it is pretty bold looking, so that's a plus. He doesn't have to live in the slums to have a nice looking house. Moving on to Trevor. Trevor lives in Sandy Shores, and his house is, well, it's not even a house, it's a trailer. And it is very unassuming looking, very far away from the city. The feds are not going to be looking for him at all, but the Chinese could start looking for him. And I think they actually do. They ransack his house. Or maybe that was the Lost. I'm actually not too sure. It might have been the Lost or the Chinese, but his house gets ransacked. But obviously, that's really the only people he has to worry about. By the end of the story mode, that's all taken care of. Both of those two groups are dead. And the feds aren't worried about him either because they think he's dead. So overall, his house is very safe from both thugs and the feds for the most part. It's very easily defendable. And by the time then the story mode comes, once again, both of the groups that hate him, pretty much everyone in Los Santos, honestly, are dealt with. So he doesn't have to worry about that. But his house is very dirty, very slummish, and it's kind of just meh. And his car is also not very good either, but we're not talking about cars here. Overall, his house is kind of meh. It is very safe, but it is also very slummish. Moving on to Lester's house in El Burro Heights. His house is a decent looking house. It's rather small, but pretty safe from both thugs and the feds. He's pretty, once again, out of town like Trevor, but he's still within the city. He's within a drive of downtown. So that is definitely a plus there. Once again, his house is not dirty. It's just small. He is pretty safe from thugs. He doesn't really have any enemies. He's Lester after all. He cannot afford to have enemies because he's kind of just an old man, and he kind of needs people to protect him, although I'm pretty sure he knows how to use a gun. I mean, he fired an RPG in the UD heist in story mode if you chose to use the chopper approach. So he should be good there at least. But overall, his house is pretty safe from both thugs and the feds. In that aspect, and it is a decent house. It's basically all the bonuses of Trevor's house without the downsides. So I'd much rather take Lester's house over Trevor's by any means. So overall, it is pretty safe and pretty good. Next up, we have Floyd's house from story mode. Floyd lives in Vespucci Beach, and it's a pretty nice looking area. Floyd is also a hard-working citizen. He has a real job with real people. He doesn't have any gang connections before Trevor shows up. He has zero enemies whatsoever. So he has all the bonuses of being safe from the feds and both thugs, while also having a pretty nice looking apartment in Vespucci. Before Trevor shows up, it's pretty respectable. After Trevor lives there for a while, it's not so respectable, but you could clean some stuff and call an exterminator. And his house is pretty good. I'd actually prefer it over Lester if I had the same pros that he does. No thugs, no feds after him. He lives right by the beach. It's always sunny there. He has parking. If he were to actually own that apartment building itself, he would probably have the best house in this video, or the best apartment building in this video, just because of sheer value alone. But I do believe he rents. He never talks about owning it in story mode. So overall, it's a pretty great house. I'd have it over Lester's any day of the week. Apartment, I mean. Next up, we have Devon Weston's Tongva Hills home in story mode. Not really online, because if we are to assume that online takes place shortly after story mode, then Devon Weston is already dead. But his house is fantastic. Basically Franklin's house, but better. Depending how you look at it, it could actually have some downsides. Franklin lives much closer to the city than Devon Weston. Devon Weston is far out of town. There's basically nothing around him. You're closer to Fort Zancudo than you are to the city, which some would find as a pro, but me personally find as a con. In terms of safety from both thugs and the feds, he is probably safe there. He has multiple businesses. He's a billionaire. He's pretty safe from the feds, and he's safe from thugs because he has security 24/7. And once again, his house is just huge, basically a mini mansion. Once again, all of the pros of Franklin's, but better in my opinion. And overall, a very solid, safe home. I would definitely take it over Franklin's, but would I take it over Floyd's? I don't know. If he had a beach house maybe, which we'll get into right now, then I might take it over Floyd's. Next up, we have Michael's Shrink's house in Del Perro Beach. It is a very nice beach house, basically like Floyd's house, but better. You're right next to the beach. You're in an actual house this time, not an apartment. And of course, the Shrink is perfectly legit. He has no crime, no criminal record or whatever. He doesn't have any gang relations that I know of. He never talks about it in the story. So everything checks out there. And he just has a nice house by the beach. Very nice. Although he is right off of the highway, you can actually go right into his house from the highway. I would be kind of concerned about privacy reasons for that. But aside from that, his house is almost perfect. If his house was just off the beach or just in front of the beach, it might be a little bit better. It being right next to the highway is a bit of a con in my opinion, but overall, very solid house. I'd probably take his house over anyone's in this video. Next up, we have Martin Madrazo's home in the Vinewood Hills. His home is very nice. This is the home that you, of course, take down as Michael. It is on stilts. You attach a cable to a truck. I believe it's called the Bison. And then you gas it and you rip it down, which then you have to pay for, which cues actually the whole event of basically GTA 5 story mode, because you start going on jewel heist, then Lester finds out you're alive. Trevor finds out you're alive, and so on. Martin has a similar situation to Devon Weston. I believe he is an actual businessman with legit companies, so he should be fine there from the feds and from thugs. He has henchmen working for him, so he's fine there. I'm sure he has enemies like Trevor and Michael and basically everyone else, but once again, he has henchmen, bodyguards. He should be fine in that aspect. And his house is overall pretty nice looking. He goes on to work with our characters in GTA Online, but he doesn't beat us up like he beat up Michael. Overall, a very solid home. I'm probably gonna have to give it a number 2 on this list, or a number 3. If I could not have the Shrink's beach house, I would probably have Martin Madrazo's, maybe Devon Weston's, but his is a little bit too far. I don't like to be that far from everything. If you're like me, you know what I'm saying, in real life, I like to be close to everything, close to all the action. But overall, a very solid home. And some honorable mentions that I forgot to mention: the O'Neill's house. Trevor burns it down, and I believe it does get reconstructed later on in the story mode. But they didn't play too big of a part. But overall, their house is pretty safe, and of course, they're a brotherhood, so they're fine. Lamar lives right next to Franklin. His house, basically everything, the criteria I said about Franklin's house also applies to Lamar. They're in the same gang. They're right in the same neighborhood. They're literally like 2 houses away from each other, so he's all fine there. And of course, Amanda, Tracy, and Jimmy all live with Michael, assuming they still live in Rockford Hills in that one house. So nothing's changed there. Chef from the story mode, I believe, lives at the Ace Liquor or the Liquor Ace in Sandy Shores. I don't really, the top doesn't really look like a living area, so maybe he just might work there and he lives somewhere else. Not too sure, so that's why I didn't include him. And that is everyone, a more fun video I thought of when I was bored laying down in bed one day, and hopefully you found it entertaining. And if you don't agree with me on some of these houses, let me know which house would you take in GTA 5. Would you rather take Devon Weston's, mansion on the side of a mountain? But you will have to worry about some things because, you're a billionaire, you might get assassinated in public. Or would you rather take Lester's humble home in El Burro Heights? Let me know down in the comments, and please like and subscribe this video. It really helps me out a ton in the algorithm. And thank you to all my channel members. I really do appreciate it. And have a great day or night or evening. I'll see you later, and goodbye.